The following evening, Margaret sat at her dining room table, meticulously updating her infraction spreadsheet. The Peterson mailbox violation was categorized, time-stamped, and added to her growing digital archive of neighborhood transgressions. She had color-coded the spreadsheet: yellow for first warnings, orange for repeat offenders, and red for board escalations. The Peterson file had just turned orange. Her phone buzzed with a text from Grace Harper, the HOA treasurer, and the closest thing Margaret had to a friend. Maybe ease up on the Petersons. Grace's text read, "Dave's mom is staying with them while recovering from hip surgery. The purple mailbox is temporary. It helps her find the house easily." Margaret's jaw tightened. She typed back, "Rules don't have exceptions for personal circumstances. If we start making exceptions, where does it end?" She set her phone down without waiting for Grace's response and glanced at Harold's portrait on the wall. The photograph had been taken during their trip to Maine, his last vacation before the heart attack. "You understand," she whispered to the image. "Structure matters." The truth was, Harold would have hated what she'd become. He'd been the neighborhood peacemaker, the man who organized block parties and helped newcomers move furniture. While Margaret had always appreciated order, it was Harold's death that had transformed her appreciation into obsession. Her nightly ritual continued as she moved to the living room window, lifting one blind slat to peer outside. The Richardson children were still playing basketball in their driveway past the 8 p.m. outdoor recreational activities curfew. She made a note. The Daltons' garbage can remained at the curb 2 hours after collection, another violation. The Morrisons' landscaping lights exceeded the permitted lumens. She'd measured them personally with a light meter purchased specifically for enforcement. Margaret's gaze swept across the silent, empty house. No one was watching her watch them. No one saw how her hands trembled slightly as she made her notes, or how she sometimes woke gasping for air in the middle of the night, convinced the universe was spiraling into chaos. The phone rang. Grace again, this time calling instead of texting. "The board is concerned, Margaret," Grace said carefully when Margaret answered. "We've received complaints about your enthusiasm." "Complaints?" Margaret's voice rose. "I'm the only one doing my job properly. This neighborhood would fall apart without me." "It's not just about the rules," Grace replied gently. "It's how you're enforcing them. People are starting to avoid community events because they're afraid you'll document some violation. The Ramirez family was asking me today if they need approval to put up a medical alert sign for their son's condition." "Of course they do," Margaret said automatically. Section 15, paragraph 4 clearly states. "Margaret," Grace interrupted, "their son has severe asthma. The sign would help emergency responders locate the right house quickly. Is that really something we should regulate?" The question hung in the air. Margaret felt her chest tighten, the same sensation she'd experienced at Harold's funeral when the pastor asked if anyone wanted to speak, and she found herself unable to move or breathe. "I'll review the bylaws," she finally managed. After hanging up, Margaret opened her filing cabinet and pulled out the community rulebook. She'd helped expand from 30 pages to 147 during her tenure. The rules were her shield against unpredictability, her fortress against the randomness that had taken Harold. Without them, what did she have left? Margaret's grip tightened on her garden shears as she watched a second emergency vehicle, a fire rescue truck, pull up behind the ambulance. 4 more first responders jogged toward the Ramirez home, their faces set with professional urgency. The commotion had drawn several neighbors onto their front lawns. Mrs. Donaldson from across the street stood in her driveway, hand pressed to her mouth. The Chen family had paused their Saturday car wash, water hose still running. "What's happening?" Margaret called to Mrs. Donaldson, irritation creeping into her voice at the growing spectacle disrupting her peaceful afternoon. "It's the Ramirez boy," Mrs. Donaldson replied, her voice tight with concern. "Elena called me this morning to cancel our walking plans." Miguel had been wheezing since dawn. Inside the Ramirez home, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Miguel lay on the living room floor where he collapsed, his airways constricting despite the rescue inhaler treatments. The initial paramedics had immediately recognized the severity of the attack. Miguel's oxygen levels were plummeting, his lips taking on a bluish tinge. "We need to establish an airway," the lead paramedic said, unpacking intubation equipment. "How long has he been like this?" "It started last night," Carlos explained, holding his son's hand while Elena assisted the medical team, her nurse's training kicking in despite her terror. "He's had attacks before, but nothing like this. We used his inhaler, the nebulizer, everything." "The new landscaping," Elena said suddenly, her eyes widening with realization. "The whole neighborhood was sprayed yesterday with some chemical. I smelled it when I got home from my shift, but the HOA notification said it was mandatory." The paramedic nodded grimly as he prepared the equipment. "We've had 3 other calls in this neighborhood since yesterday, all respiratory distress." Outside, Margaret had abandoned all pretense of gardening. She stood at the edge of her property, arms crossed, watching as the emergency vehicles blocked the narrow cul-de-sac. The fire truck had managed to stay on the pavement, but the ambulance had clearly damaged the grass median, tire tracks carved through the freshly laid sod that had been installed just last week at considerable HOA expense. She pulled out her phone and snapped several photos of the damage, zooming in on the ambulance's license plate and the tire marks. Evidence would be needed for the damage claim. As she documented the violation, the Wilsons from next door approached, their faces drawn with concern. "Margaret, don't you think this can wait?" Alice Wilson asked quietly. "That poor family." "Rules don't wait for convenient timing," Margaret replied without looking up from her phone. "If we allow exceptions, soon there won't be any rules at all." "But it's an emergency," Dave Wilson insisted. "Their boy could be dying in there." Something flickered across Margaret's face, a momentary hesitation, before her expression hardened again. "And that's terrible, of course. But the emergency vehicles could have parked properly. There's no excuse for damaging community property." From inside the Ramirez home came the sound of urgent voices, medical terminology being exchanged in rapid-fire communication. Through the front window, Margaret could see movement, people rushing, equipment being passed. For a brief moment, she caught a glimpse of Miguel's small body on the floor, surrounded by crouching adults, an oxygen mask covering most of his face. She felt an unexpected twinge, discomfort, perhaps even guilt, but quickly suppressed it. The HOA bylaws were clear. Her responsibility was clear. Margaret squared her shoulders and began walking purposefully toward the Ramirez's front door, her clipboard in hand, rule book tucked firmly under her arm. Margaret stood on the Ramirez porch, waiting for someone to respond to her knocking. Inside, she could hear the controlled chaos of the emergency response, medical terminology being exchanged, equipment being moved, the reassuring tones of professionals mixed with the panicked voices of parents. When the door finally opened, she found herself face to face not with Elena, but with one of the firefighters, a broad-shouldered man, whose name badge read Captain Reyes. "Ma'am, this isn't a good time," he said firmly, positioning himself to block her view inside. "We're in the middle of a critical medical intervention." "I understand the situation," Margaret replied, shifting to see past him. "But I need to speak with the homeowners about the emergency vehicle placement." Captain Reyes' expression hardened. "The homeowners are helping us save their child's life. Whatever this is about, it can wait." A commotion inside drew the captain's attention. "Peterson, we need that epinephrine now," someone called urgently. Captain Reyes turned back to Margaret, his patience visibly thinning. "I'll be quick," Margaret insisted, stepping forward. "It's a matter of community." "No, it's not," he interrupted. "It's a matter of life and death in there. Now please step back and let us do our job." The door closed in her face, not slammed, but firmly shut. Margaret stood momentarily stunned. In 5 years of enforcing HOA regulations, no one had ever simply dismissed her. She pulled out her phone and opened the HOA group chat. Asterisk emergency services at Ramirez residence. Vehicles damaging community property. Refuse to comply with relocation request. Advise on next steps asterisk. Grace replied immediately. Asterisk, are you serious, Margaret? Leave them alone asterisk. Before Margaret could respond, Elena appeared at the window, her face tear-streaked as she spoke urgently to a paramedic. Their gazes met briefly through the glass. Margaret expected anger, but instead saw only desperate fear in the other woman's eyes, a mother terrified of losing her child. For a fleeting moment, Margaret faltered. Then her phone pinged with a notification from the HOA property management company. Asterisk quarterly landscaping inspection Tuesday. Ensure all common areas meeting standards asterisk. The newly damaged grass median would be noted in the report. Questions would be asked. Responsibility would fall to her as the enforcement officer. The rules existed for a reason. Margaret turned and walked briskly back to her house, ignoring the disapproving stares of neighbors who had gathered at a respectful distance from the Ramirez home. Inside her immaculate kitchen, she pulled up the non-emergency police number on her phone, but hesitated before dialing. Would a regular police response be sufficient? The ambulance crew had already dismissed her concerns. She needed authorities who would take her seriously, who would understand the importance of maintaining order. She set down her phone and pulled up the Green Meadows HOA emergency contact list. At the top, for immediate threats to community safety or property, call 911. Property was being damaged. The HOA bylaws classified this as an emergency situation. She picked up the phone again and dialed those 3 fateful numbers, unaware that her entire life was about to change. 911. What's your emergency? The dispatcher answered. Margaret took a deep breath. I need to report property damage and obstruction of a residential street by emergency vehicles refusing to comply with Homeowners Association regulations. The dispatcher's silence on the other end lasted just a bit too long. Margaret stood outside the hospital room, her heart hammering against her ribs. The community service assignment from the court had been deliberately chosen for maximum impact -200 hours in the pediatric respiratory unit, where Miguel and children like him fought for every breath. It had been Elena's suggestion to the judge, not as punishment, but as education. She adjusted her volunteer badge, still unfamiliar after 3 weeks. The first day had been excruciating. Parents had recognized her from the news. Nurses had whispered behind her back, but Elena, inexplicably, had defended her presence. She's here to learn, Elena had told the hostel staff, and we're here to teach her. Now, Margaret took a deep breath and knocked gently on Miguel's door. The boy was sitting up in bed, looking dramatically better than the last time she'd seen him, unconscious on a gurney being loaded into the ambulance that fateful day. Mrs. Wilson, he said, looking up from his tablet. Mom said you'd be coming. Margaret entered cautiously. How are you feeling today, Miguel? Better. The doctors say I can go home tomorrow if my oxygen levels stay good. He studied her face with the direct curiosity only children can manage. Are people still being mean to you? The question caught her off guard. Some, she admitted, but I deserve it. My dad says hate never fixes anything, Miguel said with the simple wisdom of a child who had heard adults discuss complex matters. That's why Mom asked the judge to send you here instead of jail. Margaret blinked back unexpected tears. Your mother is very generous, more than I deserve. She moved to the window, looking out at the hospital parking lot where ambulances came and went. Each one no longer represented a rule violation, but rather a lifeline, something she was gradually learning through her service. I brought something for you, Margaret said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a children's book about a young boy with asthma who becomes a champion swimmer. I thought you might like this. I used to read it to my 3rd grade class. Miguel took the book, examining the cover. You're a teacher? I was, Margaret said quietly. For 15 years. What happened? The same thing that happened to everything else in my life. She attempted a smile. I made a very big mistake. Miguel opened the book, flipping through the pages. My mom makes mistakes sometimes too. Last week, she forgot my inhaler when we went to my grandma's. We had to come all the way back home. That's different, Margaret said gently. Not to me, Miguel replied. I couldn't breathe either way. He looked up at her. Mom says you're helping make an emergency plan for kids like me in the neighborhood. Is that true? Margaret nodded. The emergency medical access protocol had been her idea, born from countless hours watching children struggle to breathe, from listening to parents describe the terror of waiting for help to arrive. I'm trying to fix what I broke, she said. You know what my doctor says? Miguel closed the book. He says sometimes broken things heal stronger in the places they were broken. From the doorway came Elena's voice. That's true of bones, Miguel. And sometimes it's true of people too. Margaret turned to find Elena watching them. Her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from a long shift. There was no forgiveness in her eyes. Not yet. But there was something else. Recognition. The recognition that broken things don't have to stay broken forever. Margaret pulled the curtains tighter, but couldn't block out the chanting from the sidewalk outside her home. Shame on you. Shame on you. The protesters had gathered early that morning, a mix of neighbors and strangers drawn by the viral outrage, their signs visible through the sliver between her curtains. Rulers tear UMP lives, and breathe first. Beil alvilas si kiloand. Her landline rang for the 30th time that hour. She'd disconnected her cell phone after the first 1,000 text messages flooded in, many containing language she'd never encountered in her sheltered life. The voice messages on her landline weren't much better, everything from death threats to recordings of people struggling to breathe, meant to remind her of what Miguel had experienced. Margaret jumped as something hit her front window, an egg, sliding down the glass in a viscous yellow streak. She couldn't call the police to report it. They'd made it clear they wouldn't respond to her nuisance calls anymore. Her laptop dinged with another email notification. Hesitantly, she clicked on it. Asterisk from Green Meadows HOA Board asterisk. Asterisk subject. Emergency Board Resolution 2023-7 asterisk. Asterisk Ms. Wilson asterisk. Asterisk. This email serves as official notification that the Green Meadows Homeowners Association Board has unanimously voted to asterisk. Asterisk 1. Remove you from your position as compliance officer, effective immediately asterisk 2. Bar you from serving on any HOA committee or board for life asterisk 3. Implement a formal censure in HOA records asterisk 4. Require your attendance at a community healing forum. Date TBD asterisk. Asterisk. Additionally, we must inform you that 17 homeowners have filed a civil lawsuit against you personally for intentional infliction of emotional distress and reckless endangerment. Asterisk. Asterisk. The HOA's insurance policy specifically excludes coverage for malicious actions by board members and will not be providing your legal defense asterisk. Asterisk sincerely. Asterisk. Asterisk Grace Harper asterisk. Asterisk acting president. Green Meadows HOA asterisk. Margaret closed the laptop, her hands shaking. The television in the corner of her living room continued its merciless coverage. A different channel now, but the same story. The recording of the 911 call, released this morning by the County Emergency Services Department under Public Records Law, has sparked nationwide debate about abuse of emergency services. The sound of her own voice filled her living room. I need to report property damage and obstruction of a residential street by emergency vehicles refusing to comply with Homeowner Association regulations. The dispatcher's response: Ma'am, are you calling 911 to report an ambulance that's responding to an emergency? Her reply: They're damaging the grass median that my HOA fees pay to maintain. It's vandalism. Margaret lunged for the remote, but not before hearing the news anchor's voice. The child, 12-year-old Miguel Ramirez, remains in pediatric intensive care at County Medical Center. Doctors say the severe asthma attack was likely triggered by landscaping chemicals recently applied throughout the Green Meadows subdivision. The television went silent, but the damage was done. The irony wasn't lost on Margaret. The very chemicals she had insisted on using for the neighborhood's aesthetic uniformity had likely caused the medical emergency she had then reported to 911. Her email dimmed again. Margaret flinched, but forced herself to look. Asterisk from Human Resources, West Side Elementary School asterisk. Asterisk subject. Administrative leave asterisk. She didn't need to open it. After 15 years of teaching third grade, her career was over. No school would keep a teacher who had become the internet's symbol of heartless rule enforcement at the expense of a child's life. Outside, a news van pulled up, the fifth one today. Margaret retreated to her bedroom, the only place without windows visible from the street. On her nightstand sat the framed photo of Harold. She turned it face down. He would have been so ashamed.